We have to go now! Got an order! Stand down!
Whether you've never heard of it or know it well, there's something that stirs in us when we hear the word trauma. And though we often know it when we see it, we often don't know what to do when faced with trauma, much less how to recover from it. But what if I told you that you could learn everything you need to know about personal tragedy from a Sonic movie? Rise up, GG Nation, because it's time for Guidance Guy Friday, your weekly guidance lesson from your internet school counselor. And today we're taking a crash course on trauma with the Blue Blur and its arch rival, because Sonic 3 can teach us what trauma is, how it impacts us, and how to, and how not to, recover from it. Let's go! It's guidance time!
Maria!
Today, we have so many mental health words that get thrown around. Narcissist, depression, anxiety, and sometimes they get used even when the person using it has no idea what they're talking about. But out of all of them, trauma might be the most misunderstood. So in order to look at Sonic and Shadow's pain, we gotta define what kind of pain we're looking at. To use a meme, trauma is an event that causes great
emotional damage.
But it's here that things start to get a little sticky, because there are actually different kinds of trauma. Big T and little t trauma. Big T traumas are the kind of thing we think of when we hear the word trauma. Losing your home, going to war, or someone close to you passing away. These disasters can mess up your life, assuming you survive it. Now, with the little t traumas, they're not life-threatening, but they're still distressing to go through. Divorce, harassment, or moving away all count. But what defines trauma is not what happened to you, but how it changes you. Because did you know that trauma changes your brain?
Did you know that?
Here's a picture of a healthy brain from a scan. All the colors we see, the greens, yellows, and reds, all good things, since it all means that the brain is active. Now here's a picture of a brain of someone who's gone through trauma. You see the difference, right? Not only is there less color, but in some areas there's no color at all. Trauma is more than just a bad thing that happens to you. It's something that can literally hurt your mind. And when looking at the world's fastest hedgehogs, we see that not even they are immune to this pain. With Shadow, his trauma is the basis for his whole tragic backstory. Having spent his life on a gun base, Shadow's family consisted of Dr. Gerald Robotnik, Dr. Eggman's grandfather, and his granddaughter Maria. As the Chaos Controller began to understand Earth and his people, Maria and Robotnik were right there to help him every step of the way.
Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
But suddenly, gun forces go in after the trio because they see Shadow as a threat that needs to be taken out. And by the end of it all, Maria doesn't make it out alive. Losing a loved one? That's definitely a big T trauma. But what about the Blue Blur? While nothing happened to him in this movie, except for the one thing that almost happened, for Sonic we have to go back to the first film. It's here that the speedster is forcibly taken from his home, leaving his guardian Longclaw to fend off invaders, and she ultimately gives up her life to save him. Sounds like another big T trauma right there. Actually, that's two if you count the fact that he was forced to leave his homeworld or die. For both Sonic and Shadow, they had intensely negative things happen to them that they had no control over. But even with this, we have to realize that trauma hits everybody differently. What will mess up one person won't necessarily mess up someone else. For example, two people can move to a new place, have a new home, school, everything. Person A might get wrecked by the experience and they become really sad and homesick, while person B is totally chill with it and has no problem with the change. For person A, moving away was traumatic for them. So does that mean that person B was mentally stronger than person A?
Nope.
No, not at all. Because trauma isn't determined by your mental strength, but by your triggers. Going back to our example, person A might have loved the community and sense of belonging their hometown gave them because they lived there all their life, and being taken away from that made them feel alone. But person B is in a military family that moves all the time, so the sense of family doesn't come from the location that might change, but from the people who come with you no matter where you go. We all have different triggers, and it's those triggers that determine how you could be traumatized. So we now know what trauma is and the messiness that comes with it, and even took a peek at how it can mess with our mentals. Now let's lead into that and see what the damage of trauma really looks like. Despite what it might look like on the surface, both Sonic and Shadow responded to their pain in ways that are more similar than you think. One example is how their trauma caused them to isolate themselves. Even if you don't count the 50 years Dark Sonic was on ice, when he got out, Shadow was perfectly content with being by himself and had no interest in hanging around anybody else. And though we didn't see it in this movie, Sonic also had his own moments of isolation in his first adventure. And though wanting to spend time alone every once in a while is a good thing actually, if you want to spend all your free time by yourself, then we gotta talk. For those hard hit by trauma, they may want to keep themselves away. Either to keep themselves away from the people or places that harm them, or they become so broken that their home or room is the only place that they feel safe anymore. And then you add on to the fact that loneliness is on the rise all over the world, and that some folk want to connect to others but feel like they just can't. That's a dangerous combo. As humans, we don't grow in isolation. In fact, we get weaker. Science shows that those who keep to themselves too much are not only more anxious and depressed, but they're also at risk of getting sick more often than those who venture out. And this isolation can lead to the second sign of someone suffering from trauma: anger. In Shadow's case, it's super obvious since fury is this guy's default emotion. His look, his vibe, every word that comes out of this anthropomorphic hedgehog's mouth is bathed in a pool of barely controlled rage. And it's understandable. What happened to him and Maria never should have happened at all. So he feels cheated out of the life that he knew and the closest friend he's ever had. And with Sonic, we saw what happened when he thought Tom kicked the bucket, right? After the shock of losing his first human friend and low-key father figure wore off, Sonic lost it. He was ready to go scorched earth on anybody and anything that got in his way. Kinda like the other guy. And this is what makes unresolved trauma so dangerous. No one deserves to have traumatic things happen to them, and it always feels unfair when tragedies find a way into our life. That's why SNS were ticked off. Why did it have to be them? They didn't do anything wrong. And perhaps you've caught yourself saying the same thing during hard times. And when this feeling of being wronged by the universe combines with your sadness, it can create a storm of wrath. To us, it can look like being like Shadow and being moody. Or it can look like Sonic's rage and you're ready to snap at anyone who bothers you. Anger, like any other emotion, is perfectly normal. But when you use your anger to hurt others, isolate yourself, or lash out, then that's a problem. In fact, when you do that, you put yourself at risk for falling for a trap that both of our speedsters almost fell for: losing who you are. We see this the most with Sonic. When he thought he lost Tom, we see the blue blur become someone who didn't exist before this moment. Overcome by his loss, he became angry, yes, but also vengeful, willing to end Robotnik and Shadow. He also became selfish by betraying the promise he made to Knuckles and Tails to not use the Master Emerald, to now be willing to fight both of them in order to get the power he needed to get his revenge. This is not the same character we've been following for 3 movies now. And even with Shadow, you can see a difference. Sure, in the flashbacks he was still super serious, but the inner rage beast just wasn't there. He was thoughtful and adventurous. You could even say he was just a more mature version of Sonic. But now, Homeboy was perfectly fine with wiping out the entire Earth as a way to balance out the pain he felt inside. But why would he want to wipe out everybody if most people had nothing to do with his situation? It comes down to this phrase: hurt people hurt people. People we call bullies, mean, or toxic are that way because at their core, they're actually traumatized people who use their brokenness as an excuse to try to break others. And that's not an excuse. What they do is still wrong. It's just an explanation for who they are. And these things can happen to us too. Even if we aren't causing pain to others or losing our sense of self, our situation could look different. It could make us scared of experiencing that same trauma again, to the point of creating anxiety. And if you want to know more about anxiety, go check out my last video. But it can also look like depression, where you have such a strong sadness that it takes over your life, leaving you feeling empty about anything and everything. And that's not too far from going into full doomer mode and being perfectly fine with letting the world burn, because that's where Shadow was at. And these things can happen with big T and little t traumas, because it's not about what happened, but how it impacts you. But the good news is that even if you've been hurt by trauma, you're not doomed to living like this. There is a way out.
I've felt this pain for so long. It's all I know. Did your pain eventually go away?
No. But in time, I learned there's something even more powerful than pain.
No matter what you've gone through, whether it's trauma with a big T or little t, you always have the power to climb out of it. And our Hedgehog duo show the way in how to recover. The first thing we need to do is feel what we feel, just not be controlled by it. Sonic and Shadow's problem in dealing with their pain in Sonic 3 was not that they were angry, but that they allowed their anger to make choices for them. And when they did, their anger always made the wrong choice. Never hold in your emotions because it will always come out if you hold it in. But in those moments, always ask yourself if what you're thinking of doing is going to hurt you or someone else. If the answer to either of those questions is yes, then shut it down. And if need be, talk it over with someone to come up with a better plan. One thing you can do to help calm your mind and gain control over your emotions is to recall the good. The next time you're thinking negative thoughts or you feel like you're losing control, think of 3 things that are good in your life right at that moment while taking deep breaths. The breathing gives your body a chance to calm down, and seeing the good in any moment allows your mind to stop replaying bad memories or only having negative things to think about. And lastly, don't do it alone. Looking back to Sonic 3, the blue blur had Tails and Knuckles to bring him back to the brink of making a massive mistake. And though Shadow had all the wrong influences at first, when he finally had the chance to talk to Sonic instead of fighting him, he saw not only a way to heal from his trauma, but a way to make things right for the wrongs he made. You don't have to heal by yourself. Reach out to someone and let them know what you're going through. If you have a school counselor, go find them and give them the opportunity to help. Looking back on these tips, they all have one thing in common. They give the power back to you. Like we said, we don't control if or when something traumatic happens to us, but we do control how we respond to it. And by focusing on what you can control and how you can make your situation better, you're already starting to recover. And let me tell you right now that this won't be easy. No one recovers from their emotional pain overnight. It takes time and a lot of work. Be determined, and also be patient with yourself, because healing has its good days and bad. And you may even be asking, what's the end game of all of this? To never feel bad about your trauma again? To never even think about it? No, because like the good things in your life, the hard times are also a part of your life story. The goal of healing with trauma, though, is making sure your pain doesn't become your identity. When we do, we run the risk of becoming like Shadow. But if we continue to put in the work, our lives could look more like Sonic's. It's true that hurt people. But just like we saw with Sonic talking to Shadow on the moon, we also see that healed people help people, starting with themselves. Now it's your turn. Did you see any hidden gems in Sonic 3? Or are you just happy that the Sonic games are finally as good as the movies? Let's see it in the comments. And of course, how about the guidance guide by doing the YouTube thing? Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already to get this video caught up in the algorithm. And if you're in the gaming mood, I have a whole supercut of every gaming video I have on this channel. See you there. Guidance guy out.